Hey everyone, welcome to SF Garnish Music Production. My name is Justin Anchetta. We're here for West Coast Wednesdays, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. This is our 9th episode in 2021. We're planning on doing all Wednesdays in 2021. That's our goal. And today, joining me is Matthew Moldover, known as Moldover. He is a musician and instrument designer based in San Francisco, California. The MIDI Manufacturers Association has referred to him as the godfather of controllerism. Now, I first met Moldover performing at the Maker Faire in San Mateo. He instantly caught my eye and the eyes of all the passerbyers with his unique controller that he customized for his show. Since then, he has came to Soul Graffiti Studios and SF Garnish Music Production to record audio and video and also teach. So I've gotten to learn more about him and his music. He's not only the godfather of controllerism, but also an extremely educated musician and great guy all around. So please welcome Moldover. How you doing, Moldover?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for the intro. You're a great guy. I just want to say that.
Awesome. Thanks, man. So yeah, really cool, man. Just to, meet a compadre in the music business that has dedicated so much of your time and life into creating sound and also the instruments that create the sound. You want to tell us anything about your process of, inspiration, I guess, just to dive so deep into controllers?
Well, you came from, I think, having this background as a traditional musician, like when I was a kid, like a teenager, starting bands, playing guitar, writing songs, and then discovering technology when I went to college for music. And I never thought the two would come together for me, but I'd always had a interest in computers. I was really into video games, learned to do some really simple programming. And I heard kinds of electronic music then that I thought were pretty mind-blowing. And that led to the idea of hey, could I take the things I love about, traditional music, which is a lot about performing, playing live and electronic music sounds, and try to wed them together. And that led to I think we need better instruments if we're going to do that well. And that's kind of the inspiration for the controller stuff.
Nice. And so when you make an instrument like the one that I see behind you right there, I think you played on that one at Soul Graffiti, right there, exactly.
Yeah.
How much time, how many hours goes into creating that?
It's a hard question to answer because a lot of it is kind of an iterative process where that one called the Mojo, which is probably the one I'm most famous for, started off as a conventional little 2-octave keyboard. And then I later hacked up that keyboard and I put other things into it. And eventually it was I got to redo this whole thing. So that's really the 4th version of, the first controller that I used to perform with. And certainly hundreds of hours, at the minimum, just to make
over the
something custom
years, probably.
that. Yeah, it adds up to hundreds and hundreds. And there's a whole software side to it too. It's not just making the controller, but it's what does a controller do?
Yeah. Actually, a lot of people, they think of software and hardware, and it just seems so important to know the difference between those two, right? It's you have to create the physical or have the physical device, and then the software runs it. And I guess in the running of the MIDI, is it all SysX controlling, the 1 through 127 that you're dealing with, or CC?
It's just generic MIDI messages. I've started making the instruments as things for other people too. So the Mojo was the first one that, I kind of sold as a product. And I've collaborated with other companies making, commercial controllers. And the idea is just to, get these instruments in other people's hands. And so for that reason, they're all standard MIDI controllers that I make, and MIDI's great that way. You just send note messages and CCs and you can get a whole lot done.
Nice. And you also have the push too, right?
Yeah, I got deep into the push.
Cool.
And sitting by my side, sadly unplugged, but it's because I have limited counter space here.
Yeah, totally. I have a visual of the push too. I'm not sure if we're going to get into it today, just because there's so many different things we can talk about and get into. But I personally love the push and just how well it connects to Ableton just right off the bat. Have you done any customizations with the push yourself?
No, not yet. I mean, I've seen some people have done amazing customizations, like especially with that screen. You can like, I think, take that thing over and have it display whatever. And yeah, it's a really powerful, capable, expressive controller. And I feel like I just scratched the surface. You know, I started with like, okay, what does Ableton expect me to do with it? And it took me a while just to get through all that with all the step sequencing, and you can basically access so much of the deep software that is Ableton Live from that one physical interface, and it's impressive, really impressive how they crammed so much in. So yeah, I haven't gotten into customizing it yet, but I'm sure one day I will.
Nice. And in regard to school, you went to Berkeley, right? For music?
Yeah, yeah. Went to Berkeley back in the day.
Now,
Electronic music composition.
electronic music. So in your schooling, were there classes on electronic stuff, or is that all self-taught?
There were classes. I did a dual major, basically in electronic music and composition. And so the electronic music had a lot about, MIDI sequencing, synthesis. So that gave me like definitely the core concepts of how to, how to produce music, how to, a little bit about performing. They had live performance, electronic music ensembles. And yeah, I learned, I went as the self-taught musician that I described at the beginning of my musical journey. I was not very good at anything. So schooling definitely helped me get a few notches up in my skill departments.
Nice. And so what is your go-to instrument hardware of choice these days for studio and performance?
Well, can I say guitar?
There you go. Yeah. Get back to the root of music.
Yeah, I mean, traditional instruments have such incredible expressive capabilities, and I don't need to tell you, you got guitars hanging on the wall. So I'm not going to preach preach to the choir about that. But I think you're talking about controllers, and regarding controllers, I'm excited because I've been playing the Mojo for which one am I excited about? I'm always excited about something. I'll show you this one because this is like the newest and kind of unreleased controller, releasing soon, I believe. So it's kind of funky looking, right? And that's because I don't think there's anything else quite like it. There's a couple of people that have done things sort of like it, but it's basically a portable, one-handed USB MIDI controller that is meant to like connect with your favorite microphone and pop in and out. My left hand symbolizes a microphone stand, so you can drop it in your microphone stand, or you can go mobile with it. And it's called the MC1. It's got buttons and a joystick and motion sensors, and it's really fun. I barely like scratched the surface of performing with this one. I haven't been performing very much lately.
Yeah, it's hard to get out there. I mean, hopefully shows will come back. Are you doing any live streaming with all your instruments, or?
Not a lot at the beginning of the pandemic. I did some, and it's really good to play, but like as a performance venue, it's just lacking in a lot of what I really value in live performance. I mean, nothing against anyone who does live streaming, but it's not hard to argue that there's like something pretty different when you're in a physical space with other people. With music, it feels like such a visceral experience. Tons of people have had, I'm sure you and I have both had, like life-changing experiences at concerts, and part of that is about being in a space and sharing sound waves in real time with other people, and just so many things about experience, which in a live video stream is kind of boiled down. Yeah, it's kind of diminished. So anyways, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, I'm just gonna go into hibernation, kind of, or I don't know if that's the right analogy, but sort of like dig into stuff like teaching, for example, that like I haven't given much attention to in prior years, and then a lot of design work and studio work, stuff that doesn't require a stage.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was actually thinking about the difference between the live show and that feedback loop that you get from a crowd, or the live sound or experiencing with other people, versus live streaming now. And it's like you have to almost fake yourself out, and if there's some like comment or emoji that pops up, you have to like almost pretend that's like experiencing with someone. It's not quite the same. Far from it.
Yeah, it feels like a different venue. I mean, as different as like recording in the studio is from performing on a stage, I feel like live streaming is in some other category of experience. It's like its own thing, and a lot of respect to the people that do it well. And you're very right. It's like you got to react to emojis and comments instead of like,
a hug
somebody
or something, right?
pumping or a hug. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's been a steep learning curve actually too. Just what to do with that.
Have you been doing live streams?
I've been doing live streams. I mean, this is probably the most consistent live stream I would say that I'm trying to work on. Making the compression on the microphone at the right level and making sure that we're both hot enough in the mix, and then we can also share our music, etc. And I'm trying to get the acoustic music aspect of it working the same way. Yeah. So I'd love to share actually a video with you eventually in the near future with Ableton and some. It's just pretty much all acoustic, but we have like DJ effects kind of squashing down, filtering down, and then opening up with kind of fade to gray going on. And everything actually is out in the mix and everyone's hearing just Ableton. So that's kind of something new. And actually that's a question for you, Moldover, is when you do all of your effects, do you have effect pedals, hardware pedals and Ableton, or is it just Ableton effects?
I'm totally in the software land. I mean, I did have pedals. Actually, I've had pedals on and off. But I just got like kind of hooked on the portability of software when I started touring. And like, I've never been touring at like the upper echelons where I have a bus and roadies and stuff like that. So there was something really desirable about making my rig like really compact and portable, and so I got real interested in like, how little can I get away with and still have like an engaging show. And then I also went down the road of like, putting controllers on the guitars itself, and kind of like being like, well, what if my pedals are right here, and I can, I don't know, walk around the stage and have that kind of go with me. So yeah, I was controllerism for me is an excuse to like use less hardware and use more software.
Nice. And when you say software, is it all effects through Ableton that you're customizing, or is there external things?
I use some software plugins. For me, that's like the hardware. It's like add a little plugin. So Native Instruments Guitar Rig, and also I've been getting into the Helix native software. They're both, really powerful, virtual guitar effects, everything kind of softwares, and it takes a lot of work, both of them. I mean, I've been building rigs for other artists a little bit this year, and whenever possible, like I try to stick to like Ableton stock stuff because it's so like stable. It's so much easier to like do, mappings, and like I've really come to appreciate sort of how fluid the workflow of like the Ableton ecosystem is, when you use more of their stuff. Even like the pedal, amp and cabinet devices, I was always like, I don't need that. Like, come on, there's got to be, it looks super Ableton-y. It doesn't look like, a vintage guitar amplifier like I want it to look. But at some point this year I was like, all right, let me give that another shot, and it's like, okay, like you can make these things sound pretty good. So yeah, I don't know, I'm trying to try all the things, but yeah, hardware's got huge advantages as far as like latency and stability and all that kind of stuff. Are you?
Yeah, totally.
Hardware?
What do you do with the 15 millisecond delay that's still kind of there with the Ableton monitoring?
Suffer.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you can get used to it. That's all it is it's not fun, and it's sort of a sacrifice I made a long time ago, and I guess I just got used to it. I've heard that from other musicians too. Like if it changes, if there's jitter in your system, then that's always going to be hellish. But if it's consistent latency, you can kind of get used to it, and it's almost just like if you play on a stage with some weird monitor setup, where the monitors are really far away from you and there's kind of a delay, and in that, you can adjust.
Nice. And in regard to your audio interface, when you go do a live show, are you sending from an audio interface?
Yeah, like in that same idea of like having my rig like as compact and portable as possible. Like I just put everything through my audio interface. For a while I was like bringing around like a big multi-channel interface, and I'd try to like do multi-channel outputs to the mixing board and like rely on the sound person to do that mixing for me. And that works, but you know, only if you have like a sound person who really cares about what they're doing and about your performance sounding great. So in recent years, I kind of scaled it back and like I sub mix everything in my interface, and I just send a left right mix to the front of house. And when I have like I'm playing like a nicer venue and I have the time to do a sound check and everything, like I have a little app. I can walk around the venue, like I'll record some loops of my voice and my guitar and just play some stuff back, and then go out in the house and like do my own mix, which is kind of weird, but it's the DIY ethos that I've come to embrace.
Makes sense.
Yeah, artist.
I mean, if you know what you like, right, you can actually record it and go out. That's a great idea. Yeah. And which audio interface did you go with? The simpler version?
Yeah, I got an RME Babyface, which is pretty awesome. And regarding latency, like, you know, having a great interface and of course, like a fast computer, you know, you can get your latency down pretty low. So I'm fortunate I got a new computer last year too. So I'm able to run the stuff I was running before at lower latencies and feeling pretty good. I wish I could play shows.
Yeah, totally. So this is something that I just kind of hacked, I feel, in the world of using the latency and not having it affect me as much, is I turned off the monitoring of my own voice, and I turned on, you know, in Ableton, the auto, and then was able to, you know, have that be the send out to my own headphone and the one that I'm streaming to or the audience is hearing at a show. And is that the way that you're doing it too? Just so there's no like here you are off the mic and then here you are with Ableton effects, like that 15 millisecond.
Yeah, I think you mean by doing it like your audio interface, you can just direct monitor the vocals, like pass them through. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I turn that off and I only listen to Ableton. Is that what?
Oh yeah. That's what I do too, actually. Because I'm also like with the MC1, like I'm doing lots of heavy processing, like harmonizing and vocoding, pitch shifting, like some stuff. So I feel like I need to hear all that, and it's easier to just do that. And another trick actually in that department is, you know, you can see, this is a really good Ableton pro tip. If you turn delay compensation on, it's under one of them menus, right? Under options, if you turn delay compensation on, you usually don't want to use that at all for live performance because that's going to add latency to different audio chains that you have. But when you have that turned on and you just put your mouse over any device, like a plugin or an Ableton audio effect or whatever, it'll show you the latency for that plugin. So you'll discover like, oh, like some live devices have like significant latency, and really plugins, significantly things that do crazy, you know, harmonizing, auto tune kind of things. Some of them have like significant latency. So you can see that, first of all, by turning on delay compensation. Definitely turn it off when you want to play live, or you're going to have way more latency than you want. But the trick is, if you have some vocal effects that can exist in parallel, like my harmonizers, I really love these vocal harmonizers that I do, making it sound like I have like a whole chorus of like auto-tuned Moldovers singing along with me. I put those in a separate parallel effects chain in like a rack, and that way I don't have to deal with the latency there. So that's like 100% wet in its own effect chain, and it's got an extra like 30 milliseconds of latency or something. But the direct vocal with my sort of lead, you know, primary voice, I put through as few of those latency causing plugins as possible. And yeah, and by sort of strategizing that way, I can get crazy effects, but without too much latency that it becomes more difficult to perform.
Nice. That's a great idea. So what I heard is that your main voice has minimal effects, so it has less latency, like just the basic 50 milliseconds, and then the 30 millisecond and above on a send, like its own separate send.
Yeah, you can do it on send. You can do it on 2 channels inside of a rack. You know, 2 tracks, whatever. Nice.
Very cool. So we got some people here, Figgy Foss, appreciating what we're talking about. A lot of people are interested in looping, and actually Cello Joe just joined us. Hey, Cello Joe. Yes, cheers. Our brother. And his question is, what harmonizers do you use? Which plugins do you use in Ableton?
I've been using Isotope Vocal Synth, and also Manipulator, who makes Manipulator. I can never remember the name of that company.
Is it Wave or Waves?
No, it's where is it? It's the band Infected Mushroom like endorses them, so it's almost like Infected Mushroom Manipulator. You'll find it.
Nice.
But yeah, Manipulator is cool for like the crazy modulations and alien voices and stuff. And Isotope Vocal Synth is cool for like the more conventional, like create, copies of my voice, that classic like Imogen Heap, hide and seek effect. And also it has like vocoder and some other cool tricks in there.
Beautiful. Yeah, Cholo Joe just messaged Infected Mushroom. So he's listening in here to what we're talking about. And yeah, anyone else that wants to ask a question to Moldover, he is the godfather of controllerism and knows Ableton very well, the MIDI devices. I want to get into creating your own racks. And I've been really enjoying just how simple. I'm like, oh, I love this, I love this, I love this. And it's like a starting template for a lot of my instruments or vocals. And then I just group it, click save, and then I'm just starting off without having to go through and drag and drop so many different things. So maybe I'm actually curious if you can share with us your Ableton scene and give us an example of a rack that you've like up to date, you've been really appreciating. And as you get that going, I just wanted to talk about a few things that Moldover is currently working on in projects. He's been collaborating with an Argentinian custom controller maker, Yaltex. He animated a music video with artist B1, and he's been working on an acoustic unplugged album recorded at Soul Graffiti Studios, which is where he also teaches Garnish music production classes. And that's one of the reasons why we're being featured here, is that we are having interviews and guests on often, just talking about where they are in life and what they're doing, but also featuring different teachers that are teaching our short 36-hour course, 120-hour producer program, and 430-hour academy program. So quite a bit of things going on. And I'm just going to read a few more here. Are you almost ready there to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm loading up my live set.
Okay.
It should be just another 30, 60 seconds.
Nice. So
sorry, I'm making mic noise.
No worries. Setting up the mic too.
Like slow fall.
Yeah. So my little device here that I'm reading off of just fell. So we're always making adjustments here to the live show.
Okay, well, I can share. Theoretically, I'm ready.
Okay, and another question from Chella Joe that just came through is, what about Ovox from Waves? Have you used that at all?
I played around with that. One of my clients is a fantastic artist in San Francisco named Lucinda Bell, and she got Ovox, and so we dove into that. That was kind of like me and just spending a couple hours with it, so I didn't get to go super deep, and it is a super deep plugin. Yeah, you can do a lot with it. She was disappointed, and I was a little bit too, because it doesn't really do the Imogen Heap thing, which I love, which is where you can like shoot MIDI notes into it and get copies of your voice at those specific pitches. So that's one of like my favorite tricks, and that's what I was kind of trying to set up for her. So, but it does have it has one of the most like powerful like vocoders I've ever used. I can't remember all the other tricks it has, but it's got like a 2 synthesizer engine built into it or something, and tons of modulation. It was just like, oh yeah, I need to sit with this for 4 or 5 hours before I really feel like I know this whole thing. So
nice. Yeah, so good mention of Ovox by Waves. Oh, sorry, I cut you off. What was the last part?
I was just saying Ovox is a rabbit hole if you want to go down there.
Nice. And what exactly would you use to do the Imogen Heap effect, which everyone loves so much?
Yeah, well, you can do it with Manipulator or Vocal Synth, Isotope Vocal Synth. Like those both do it. There's other plugins, I think, but those are my favorites.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. So are you ready to share your screen?
Yeah. Let me see if I got audio here. Oh, forgot to hit the share screen button. That will let me do audio. Yeah. Okay. So I'll share my live set here. Oops.
Nice. So what are we looking at here?
What are we looking at? So I am redesigning my whole live set. Primarily, well, one, because I want to, and two, for the Yeltex project, which is where we're going to make a new performance controller that you can use along with this Ableton live set to do some fun, expressive, crazy stuff with the controller that I set up without you having to set it up. So it's a lot more complicated right now than what I would actually share, you know, in conjunction with that controller. And that's because my specific needs, well, not everybody has a Robocaster guitar and not everybody has this MC1 vocal controller. So, you know, there's a lot more going on in this set than the basics. But you were asking about effect racks. So why don't I show you just a little bit of like my playback effects system. So let me just clean the screen up a little bit here. Make it a little friendlier and bigger.
Yeah. And I'm sure you have different effects racks for different types of instruments, right?
Yeah, totally. So this group track here, PB for playback, contains my 4 playback tracks. I've been able to get down to 4 tracks. So drums, bass, guitar. I mean, they're not always guitars, but this is like my simplification, and effects, which is just like everything else. So let's go to pick a song. Don't mind that window. Okay, so what we're looking at is 8 scenes. I just organized my songs into 8 scenes for playback, and I have buttons that can trigger, you know, just first scene, second scene, third scene, jump around like so. And let me see. Yeah. So what can I tell you about these? You're asking about effects. So the first track, this is the drum track. This one has a few racks on it. They're not all mapped out right now, but I'll just demo them. So my previous controller, the Mojo, had lots of touch strips. So I built racks specific for the touch strip controller where you can like activate it by touching it, you know, manipulate it by moving your finger around and then let go and it turns off. So these effects, these first 2 racks are designed, you know, to turn off when they're at 0, and often to have like maybe more than one section. So this first one, I'll just play the dry drum loop. Oop, fader. That's the dry drum loop, and this one is like a 2-section touch strip effect.
Is it possible to open that up and kind of show us what that touch strip is doing while you do that? Just
to explain the concept, it's kind of like using a pitch wheel or something where I split it into 2 zones, you know, so you can go up and get this like chorusy effect and go down and get the redux effect. So looking inside there, there are a few chains. I do a lot of using multiple chains in a rack along with the chain selector. So this is where a lot of the magic happens. So you have like a dry chain, which is the first one, and then you crossfade into this first version of Redux. This is using the older Ableton Live 10 version of Redux because I'm still in the process of like updating all these effects. So the old version, which I didn't like so much, had like the hard and the soft, you know, version of the downsample part of Redux. So that's why I had to have 2 sections, because I wanted the lower part to be in the hard setting and the upper part to be in the soft setting. And you can see it's also, if you look at, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you can see it's also changing the downsample as we go. And then somewhere in the middle of the throw of our control, we fade over to this poorly named chain, which is really a chorus effect, and it's changing the delay time on this chorus to give you this kind of ringy, resonant. So that is one example. It's a pretty straightforward effect.
Nice. Very cool. It actually seems like this is something new concept wise, and I just want to kind of say this for other people that are starting off in Ableton, that this isn't probably something you want to get into right away, is creating your own like this, but this is where you can go. And really cool to be able to pretty much what you're doing here is you're taking multiple different effects and automating them over time and then putting them on a knob so that they engage and fade into the next effect when you want it to, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like fading between different effects and also controlling those effects all with one knob.
Nice. Not to interrupt you too much here, but another question from our good buddy Cello Joe. He says, how do you get the tempo and time signature to show up in the scene launch area? Is this Live 11? And the answer is yes, it is a Live 11, and that is a difference that you can expand out left, and your master shows what tempo and BPM you're at. Previously in Ableton 10, you can actually customize that by typing in like 180 BPM and it will change to that, but it was kind of hidden. And they just decided to make it a little bit more transparent for people to change tempo. So, yes,
I like it.
I like it too.
Question. We should get Joe on the chat here.
I know. My goodness. Should I just
ask him questions?
maybe I could just invite him to the Zoom too or something.
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe on the next one. That's another tech setup I don't need to do right now. Yeah. So that's awesome, man. So we have one concept idea. So that's just the first one. The touch strip is another.
Yeah, I call this touch strip, but yeah, I was going to show another like more complicated one. Maybe this one here called rhythm, and this one is mapped out on my controller, so it's easier to grab. So this one was to kind of create drum fills, just the idea of like build-ups, that you want to do at the end of phrases, and just to play what that one sounds like real quick. Here's a loop again. And the idea is just by like kind of improvising different positions on the knob, you can make, the electronic version of a drum fill. That kind of thing. So what's going on in there?
Yes, let's open that up. It really sounds like that beat masher, but then the ending of it goes into that really cut up eighth note like synth effect, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So the earlier chains, there's always a dry chain here. So unlike in that other rack, you can see this top. Actually, I'm not really using the chain selector here. Oh, I'm doing another trick here. So you can kind of do the same thing you do with the chain selector. If you look at the on off or activate switches for each of the chains here, kind of where my mouse is, you can see that gray moving around, and that indicates which chain is activated. And I think I might have done a reason for doing that. It might be because the chain selector here, these are like the input to this effects chain, whereas the on-off switch, the activate switch, and the volume fader here, they control the output of this effect chain. So if you're doing things with delays, like that makes a big difference. That's kind of esoteric, but basically, like if you recall in this one, I was using the chain selector, but this represents the input volume to these chains. And if you're doing something with a delay and you want that delay to immediately turn off, well, you can't control that from the input selector chain. So anyway,
nice. A really good question. Actually, this is something that popped up in my head too, and I think a lot of people want to know this. And Cello Joe just said, "How do you map that?" And is there a way maybe you could just walk through the process of going through maybe one or two mappings and customizing that change up?
Sure. I'll just finish the explanation roughly of what this rack is, and then we can make it, I'll show that. So Yeah, so this one, it scrolls through changes the output, which one is activated, the output. And so you can see that in which ones are green and have the gray activate switch turned on. And it goes through a series of effects. One, there's actually an effect in the dry track, which is this auto pan. This first chain here is a delay-based effect with 2 subchains. So 2 different delays in one chain. This one also has 2 different delays. So mostly it's delay based until you get up to this last track. And as your keen ears heard, this one has an additional beat repeat effect in here, as well as an auto panner. So this is like a super, super complex rack. And I don't want to get too far into it. And it's a better idea to answer that question. So I'll just bring in a fresh and empty audio effect rack.
And as you bring this in, because you just described the 2 different ways that you mapped it. Is that why that chain you were just scrolling up and down with your pointer, right?
Yes.
You mapped it differently.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll totally do that. I'll show a cool thing in Live 11. You can change the number of macro knobs that you have. That's what these 8 knobs are. And it used to be fixed at 8.
I love
now
that.
You can have up to 16.
That's
or
crazy.
one big one, which I
So
much
good.
prefer. I like keep it simple on the outside anyway. Right. So it says drop audio effects here, or you can right or option click. Oh no, you need to see your chains. Sorry, and say create chain. So I usually start, I don't know, with a dry chain and call it dry, and then you'll have multiple effect chains. You know, and we'll pretend that this one has like an echo, and so to do a mapping for the chain selector I'll show because that's a little easier. We'll actually put an echo effect in there just to, give a complete simulation. And I'm going to put this at 100% wet.
So you've highlighted echo and then drop that in.
Right.
Yep.
So now we've got one chain with echo and one chain that's dry. And we're going to show the chain selector. It's usually hidden. That's why this hide button is blue. But you hit the chain button and it shows the chain selector. And now you can move these little widgets around and there's little shortcuts for distribute evenly and blah, blah, blah. But these just basically represent, again, the input volume to these 2 chains, to our dry chain and our echo chain. So if we wanted to like crossfade between the dry and the echo, we can like stretch them out. And it's hard to notice, but if you're, depending on where your mouse is, you're either like trimming, where this thing is, or you're creating a fade. So I'm gonna create a super long fade from one to the other. That's good enough. And then by moving this slider at the top here, we're fading from dry. Oop, restart playback again. Restart these loops. Echo.
Nice.
So we get a fade, and then if we want to control this from this knob, we use the macro mapping function. So you hit this map button up top. Everything that turns green is everything that can be mapped. Click on this chain selector, which is what we want to map, and then click the map button underneath this macro knob.
Perfect. And so what you just did, going from 0% to 100% of the echo, that's kind of simulating the 0 to 100% function on that echo already, right?
Yeah.
So
this is like more complicated way.
Exactly. So the audio effects rack, what's really cool about it is then, what you were just showing in your more complex versions is that you can then change it and go from so the 0 to 127 represents the knob position, right? 0 to 127 all the way over. And you can then put in at, let's say 48, you can then put in your new effect to fade in. And that's what we were hearing on yours. And that 8th note synth ending beat repeat was really cool ending part. Oh, there you go. Yeah. What a great idea.
I'm doing what you're telling me. It's a good idea. So you could fade in a beat repeat here.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah. So this is just one of the amazing upgrades, actually, I would say, of Ableton 11 is that one knob. Instead of having to look at 8, you can just simplify it, and it's a lot cleaner, I would say, of a look. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, I like this because I do a lot of sort of wrapping stuff up for other artists and for myself. It's the same process where, like, at one point I got really deep into this, crazy rhythm rack I was showing you earlier, right? And I don't even remember because it was a while ago, and there's like racks within racks, and I'm dealing with triplets and multiple effects, and being able to wrap it all up into a little package and just remember, like, oh, okay, there's one knob that does the cool thing, means I don't have to dive into it. And also, like, if I just want to map this to my brand new set, or if I want to give this to you, like, I just send you the rack and just map that one thing, and it does something interesting. So that's really the value of the macro features, being able to, like, kind of tidy things up into a package where you can take all the complexity and simplify it down to one knob, which you can then map to whatever you want on your MIDI controller.
Absolutely. That's great. Have you heard of the Will Marshall effects? I think it's actually a free download on Ableton.
Yeah, I know Will.
know
I haven't checked out his effects lately. Are they good?
Awesome. It's an older one. I've been using it for quite a while. It's like a Will Marshall, what's it called? Some DJ effects, but it has fade to gray, which is like that, delay effect, and then squashing the filtering until it just literally crosses and disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a beat repeat or a beat masher, and you can do those two together. Those are my two favorite of those, but there's also like his 8 knobs pump. There's another one that kind of makes it kind of tinny sounding, just changing the EQ, I would say, of the mix, so you can kind of like drop it into like something bigger.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah. And curious too. So I'm just talking about Will, but I am talking to you, and you do these racks. So do you have a specific like go-to DJ effect rack? I know you just shared a few with us right here. But like, I guess on your master chain per se, do you use it ever on your master chain?
Yeah. Those I'm redoing also. So that's actually where I'm at specifically, is like redoing my master effects. So that's what's happening over here, and this is the first one I'm doing, and that's why it looks all Live 11y with like one knob per rack. But I'm also doing it with a new unreleased controller, which you can't see, but it's got joysticks all over it. So instead of touch strips, you can see all these knobs moving because I got some joysticks to play with, which are my new favorite thing.
Nice. So the joystick is really just like throwing them left and right and creates that chance probability effect, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of like, what I like are at least for performance, I like controls with springs in them, essentially. That's a way to think of it. Like touch strips for me are fun because when you can just control on and off by touching and releasing, and it's kind of like a spring. It's like the pitch wheel on a traditional MIDI keyboard, always springs back to center, and you can make that springing effect like the on off, and that way you don't have to do two different things. You don't have to turn on an effect and manipulate it. And and something like a joystick, obviously it's like an XY. You can do more expressive things by choosing which of 4 or 8, infinite little directions you want to go. So anyways, that's what I'm getting into with my my master effects. So yeah, just got a few here, but some simple filters, chopper thing, another sound in here. So I haven't gone too far with those, but I tend to keep things relatively simple. You can see I was playing around with a plugin called Tornado, which lets you do insanely complicated macro mappings, essentially. Like it has this whole system where you can do these curves and fades, for these 8 macro knobs, and you can pick a million different effects. And this is like, yeah, it's like super crazy. But it leads to this kind of design where like your one knob does like really like a million things. And in my way of design, like it gets so complicated, like you're not really conscious of like what it's doing. It doesn't become something you can play, like something like a simple filter sweep, you know. You get like an intuitive sense of like, oh, okay, this is the filter, and then you can grab like the chopper over here and combine them, and I don't know, somehow it feels more like you're playing the effect than if you have one knob that's like kicks in the filter, then the chopper comes on, then there's like a reverb that's got an LFO on it, and you know, and it can do some like really crazy awesome things, but I don't know, it creates this like sort of less playable interface. So anyways, I'm geeking out too hard.
No, this is why we're talking to you, man. Let's geek out. Yeah, no, this is great. And you also said, yeah, I don't go too complex, but like what you're doing is super complex for above a lot of people's heads. But what's also great is that there are ways to be able to grasp these ideas of just creating your own racks and then customizing the controller. So each of those little green dots is showing that you've already mapped that to your controller, right?
The green dot is, I think that just shows the macro mapping.
The like macro mapping. Oh, I see. Okay, so that's going over to your joystick, which is your macro.
Yeah. Mapping. Well, this is a whole other thing over on the left here. This is a Max for Live device where I'm doing a special trick to take joysticks, which normally send like from 0 to 127. This is like getting super geeky. Sorry. If you look at this first knob on this Max for Live device, you can see the knob goes from 0 to 127, but from 0 to like 63 actually controls the macro knob in the rack next to it. So this is me like hacking. This is what Max for Live is great for. When you're like, oh man, like, you know, it's hard to program rack effects for these joysticks because they always bounce back to center, and you have to do these more complicated things because most effects, you know, you just work better if they go from 0 to 127. You want your filter sweep to go the whole way. Mm-hmm. And so if your controller is only, you know, going from 0 to 63 and you want your filter to go, you know, through its entire range, you have problems. So I made this Max for Live device, which is a little go-between. So this goes between your joystick and an effects rack, and it lets you get a full range of 127 values from going left and from going right. And if you go up or if you go down, you also get like full 127 values. So it's a way to like sort of turn your joystick that brings back to center into like 4 different, you know, controller sources.
No, it's great. So you have the spring controller in the center, so when you just take your finger off, it just goes to 0 again.
Exactly. So with this one joystick, I can like wow, you know, wank around, and I'm controlling 4 different knobs, and it's basically up, left, down, right. Mm-hmm. You know, so this is a very intuitive, like, oh, I go right and I get this thing, and I go up and I go to this thing, and I left this thing, and so
it's a lot of joy
at the end of the day. A lot of joy.
Joy 1, joy 2. And so is it possible to open up your detailed MIDI mapping there to show that you've customized, like when I go left, I want it to affect, you know, the audio effects rack Joy 1 XL to go 0 to 127, for example?
Yes. So what is this rack? Okay, yeah. So this is like the low pass filter rack, which is controlled by moving this joystick down. Mm-hmm. It goes from 0 to 127, and this is doing a pretty simple macro mapping. For new users, you should also get familiar with this macro mapping list up in the upper left-hand corner,
nice,
which shows you the existing mappings that you've created. So in this one, I'm using the chain selector instead of doing any kind of fade. It's just basically going from the dry chain to the wet chain as soon as it moves past 0. And then it's just controlling the filter cutoff and resonance, and you can see that in the graph on the auto filter device.
Nice.
And it sounds like a nice creamy filter. Fun with joysticks.
Very cool. Man, I want a joystick controller now. Maybe Push 2 can do that next time. Let's put a little joystick on it somewhere.
Yeah, or maybe they make like a companion like sidecar controller that's covered in like faders and joysticks and stuff.
Actually, I just wanted to give a big shout out to Simplicity here. Is Akai MPK Mini joystick, joystick, lots of joy right there. So I had no idea actually have a joystick, and I've never customized it like this. So I'm excited to like try out this little Moldover joy sometime.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
Awesome. So, dude, so cool, man. I just wanted to say, like, going into the innards of Ableton and talking to you about this, it's like talking to a surgeon and like opening up their belly and saying, "This is what I like about the intestines," you know. And yeah, just so it's so unique that musicians can talk so detailed. It's like two guitarists, I don't know, taking apart a guitar, I would say, or geeking out. Definitely geeking out.
Yeah, there's a level of geekery, but
Yeah.
you flatter me. I no one's ever compared me to a surgeon. Thank you.
Man, well, I think that this program is pretty in depth. Ableton, especially. I mean, Logic goes there, but I think Ableton definitely takes it up a notch in regard to the rack customizations and operator and creating your own instruments. We're going to be ending here pretty soon, and I just want to talk a little bit more about some of the stuff you're working on, and then I'm going to share your website and a video that you created there, and you can maybe tell us a little bit about it before I play it. But so some of the things that you've been working on is a remix EP for a fundraiser coming up, 4-track remixed The Sound of Change, part 1 and 2, installation for Meow Wolf, Las Vegas, The Music Mill, Splice Sample Pack collaboration with Mikey Hart. So that's awesome. You're doing a Splice Pack. You want to talk about that a little bit?
That's actually, it's really Mickey's Splice Pack. So I don't know. I do a lot of work for Mickey Hart, and I don't talk about a ton of it because it's all like work for hire, and you know, it's not like I can't talk about it, but you know, it's like kind of his boat to captain. But nice. The Splice Pack is one thing we did in 2020. And it's just cool. There's a pack of samples of all these crazy instruments, many of which I kind of helped design the sounds for. Like this one called the Beam. It's like goes back to this really interesting story about the soundtrack for Apocalypse Now, which he did, and like putting piano strings on a I-beam, and anyways, inventing this instrument. And so I've helped design a lot of the processing on that instrument, and a lot of that went into that Splice sample pack. And working on redesigning his whole live performance rig, which is an amazing beast to tame. Talk about complex Ableton Live setups.
Nice, very cool. And I'm curious, why don't you have a Splice Pack? And are you thinking about doing that? Because you do have some pretty unique sounds.
Good question. I mean, I'm not as famous as Mickey Hart, so that might be a reason. But I haven't put out sample packs in a while. I did one with an album a long time ago. But yeah, I did the remix thing, which is a collaboration with artists, a little bit like a sample pack, but not really to put out remix stems. But it's a good idea.
Yeah. And then another question is, on your website, which moldover.com, or is there any other way to get your racks at all, your custom racks, and what you're doing with the joystick you just walked through?
Yeah, I mean, there's an older version of it out there. I think if you just search for like Moldover racks, you'll find them probably on somebody else's website. But I'll be, as I said, I'm revamping all these racks right now for this new controller, which I'm doing with Yeltex. And so there'll be like a free Ableton Live template set that goes with the controller. And even if you don't have the controller, you can grab it and use all the racks from it. And maybe I'll probably zip up the racks as a separate thing because that's such a popular thing. But yeah, there'll all be effects like this that are like relatively simple and intuitive to play, but carefully designed to let you do some smooth and expressive things with live devices.
Nice. And I wanted to also share a little bit about your Patreon page. And you have different private online hangouts, live concert videos, sound packs, and behind the scenes videos. In the sound packs, is that something that you do as well? Is create some
that actually, you're right. The racks are there. I don't know if they're public, but that's what that encompasses like racks, and I released them last year, I think. Yes, in the summer.
Okay, so people can actually support you on Patreon and get access to that. So check out the Patreon page. I am going to share to everybody this right here. So we're looking at Moldover's site. We're looking at your Patreon. You can play this video by going to moldover.com. Go to his Patreon right up here. And I want to get back to the main page here. So when you enter the site, it pops up with a video. Do you want to talk about this video at all? It's a pretty awesome video you put on.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a traditional music video. It's like me, you know, performing sort of, and it's got a story, and it's about what the song is about, which is about going to some pretty dark places, which life involves for many of us, for all of us really, and catharsis. You know, music has always been for me a way to work through emotional challenges, and this video and the song are really directly about that. And yeah, transmuting darkness into light, if you will.
Nice. Yeah, that is definitely a huge part of music, whether you're playing the light music or the dark music. It's just trying to create something positive from wherever you are. And really appreciate the vulnerability of, you know, sharing the different parts of you and continuing to do your art as you're doing all this tech geeky stuff too. I know it's such a left-right brain, and a lot of people get amazed at the artists that can, you know, keep up with the times and the tech and still drop into performing and art and accessing the dark side and bringing some light into it. I'm going to take us out here with a little outro and the video from Moldover. And so once again, my name's Justin from West Coast Wednesdays, SF Garnish. We're here every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Our guest today was Moldover. Thank you so much, Moldover, for being with us. Really appreciate your skills. And I think that I personally, out of all of, I think the 9 episodes plus that I've done so far, I got a lot out of this one. A lot of inspiration, just because I see the tangibility of Ableton, really, just through what you shared and how much detail you've gone into. So really appreciate that. And I just really want to give you some gratitude back by sharing more about your website. Go to moldover.com. And this is a video that pops up. If you want to support him, go to his Patreon page. He has his racks and sound packs there. And you can also contact him on his contact page. So here we go, listening to one of his tracks. Beautiful. That was Moldover. Go to moldover.com. Go support Moldover and his Patreon page. My name's Justin Anchetta from SF Garnish Music. Moldover is one of the many amazing teachers. He's probably one of the most advanced controller teachers and MIDI teachers, both software and hardware, that we work with. And once again, thank you so much, Moldover, for being here with us. And we're going to take it out with a little bada bing, bada boom. And I'm going to talk to you in just a little bit after I sign out here, Moldover.
Cool. Thank you, Justin. It's awesome. Thank you.